Good morning, everyone. It's Henson, President, Founder of AgileDad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Standup. So without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that has been driving me crazy. So I have had an opportunity to teach a lot of classes recently, some for private companies and some for public Scrum Masters, Advanced Scrum Masters, Product Owners, and Advanced Product Owners. And one of the trends that I'm seeing happen is that many people are having trouble defining where the beginning line of that Agile or Scrum implementation starts. So what I'm finding is that they're leaning heavily on the product owner and saying, just bring me a shrubbery or bring me a rock. And it's just, they're asking for something, but they don't exactly know what they're asking for. And then when a team comes back with a rock, the product owner is like, no, not that kind of rock. I was thinking an igneous rock or a sedimentary rock, right? And it's this trial and error over and over again, trying to figure things out, when in actuality, that's a symptom of something that's much greater. So you've often heard me call the Scrum Master a doctor. Their job is to diagnose symptoms, to listen to symptoms, make a diagnosis, write a prescription, and then oftentimes let the team resolve those issues on their own, right, with the help of the prescription. But I think that sometimes we either A, try to solve all the problems ourselves, which was the topic of yesterday's podcast, or B, we don't come in at the right time and we don't have the right information. So it causes us to end up in this endless cyclical loop, right? So how can we resolve this? How can we get out of that loop? And I think that there are some certain things that should happen before the team ever approaches the work. So before we ever get to pure Scrum, where we have execution and learning and inspecting and adapting and measuring and building and focusing on outcomes, before we ever get to those points, there are other things that need to happen. So what I want to do today is I want to trace this backwards for you. So let's start with the end in mind, right? We're going to use grow. So what's our goal? Our goal is that we want to have growth. We want to have accelerated income. We want to have growth in our product, and we want to make sure that people are aware that our product or service is the best in the business. How do we get there? We get there through proper marketing, right? We need to do adequate marketing to let people know that our product or service is the best in the world. And how do we know our marketing is good? Well, we focus on outcomes and not outputs. We focus on what's going to make our end users the most happy. So we validate solutions via end user feedback and some analytics. So we do some validation. There's some validation in place, right? And from that point, if we go backwards, how do we know we're validating? What are we doing? Well, we're building something. We're measuring against analytics. We're taking our learnings and we're making pivots or adjustments and making adaptations, because I think that that's important for us to realize. So when we make those adaptations, that is when we pivot and we can create user stories, story mapping, empathy mapping, and gain context. So now we're at a point where the user stories are driving our Scrum framework, which is allowing us to inspect and adapt, which is generating outcomes that validate against the user feedback, so that marketing can create a good marketing plan so we can have continuous growth and ask ourselves questions, why is this working or not working? And are we having any churn, right? So what we're doing in essence is we're defining user problems and talking about what problems or solutions we need to put in place in order for the user stories to make sense. So before we can get to journey mapping and story mapping, we have to decide what problem we're trying to solve, where we're trying to go, right? And then once we have some kind of resolution there where we're defining the user problems and we understand what they are, then and only then can we do proper user stories and write those down and have story mapping and context of what's happening. But how do we know what the key problems are? How do we know what the user problems are? Well, we should probably start with some high-level objectives of what we're trying to do and some key results, some OKRs, if you will, right? We want to make sure we know at a strategic level what we're trying to do. And we want to have some North Star metrics for how we're going to measure success and where we're going. But we also need to have a clear vision and strategy in order to make sure we're successful. So if I took this from the top down, it would look something like this. We'd have a clear product vision and strategy for our organization. Well, first we have an organizational vision and strategy. It was clear and easily, well-defined and easy to follow. Then we would have a clear product vision and strategy that locks in, that's in lockstep with the organizational vision and strategy. Also at the strategic level, we'd have some North Star metrics to know how we're going to measure success. And we would have some OKRs identified to talk about objectives and key results and what our expectations would be. At which point we can get into the UI, UX, user experience piece of this, where we can start taking those OKRs and defining what user problems we have and figuring out what problems we're trying to solve. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to make better? What are we trying to enhance? And we can create user stories, narratives, story mapping, empathy mapping, context, so that we have high level context around what we're going to do. And only at that point is it safe for us to start generating backlog items, creating our product backlog, and getting into our product management framework. Whether it's Scrum or any other, that's the first place where we pick these things up and actually look at it as physical work that needs to be done, breaking it down small in size so it's easily consumable. And then we take time in sprints to build, measure, learn, and adapt. So we want to make sure that we can do all these things and make adjustments and get what we need so we can validate our solutions to make sure they're good via user feedback and some analytics. Then we focus on our outcome, not on our output. We're not just trying to crank out widgets. And finally, through good marketing, we can have solid growth. Wow. Outcome-driven growth. Who would have ever thought? But this is the model to success. This is what we should be doing. We need to make sure that we're focused, that we're dedicated, and that we understand that Scrum isn't just the whole pie. Scrum is just one piece of the pie. And I think that if we look at it as a hub that we can build around, so we can do all kinds of other things like ideation and initiation and creating an MVP, I think that's going to help us gain better, more reliable feedback. And it's going to help us keep our eyes on the final product, keep our eyes on the prize so that we can be successful and so that we can be measured based on the outcome, happy consumers, not just on the output, cranking out a high quality product or service. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you found this useful. As always, we encourage you to visit agiledad.com where you can learn more about this topic or others. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.